Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing my much overdue book chat about all the books that I read in August as well as September. So I didn't do one last month because I got a little bit disillusioned with the books that I was reading. So I read two books in the month of August. The first one was an audiobook, and that is The Gallery. And I'm going to be honest, I do not remember who wrote either of these books, but The Gallery was sold to me kind of as a chasing Vermeer sort of story, and if you guys have watched my channel for any length of time, you know that I love that middle grade series. The Gallery is about a little girl who goes to work at a manor house, and she kind of discovers the secret with the lady of the house. And they call a room of the house the gallery because this is kind of where she has stashed all of these paintings. She's been a massive collector of art for her adult life, and it's kind of how her family gained some notoriety, but now she's gone a little bit insane. So I did not like this book at all. I was confused as to who they were trying to aim the book towards for a few different reasons. Now, I know that a lot of middle grade deal with a lot of very serious topics, but they usually are approached better than what this book approached it. Things like madness, manipulation, drugging, very heavy topics that I don't think were really talked about in a way that I would feel comfortable recommending it to a teenager or a young teenager, because they're not really talked about in any sort of productive way. They're just kind of thrown in there. This could very easily have been a mystery book with a young protagonist for adults, but it also had a real simplicity of writing. So I was really confused as to who this book was really supposed to be aimed towards, because I felt like the topics that it dealt with were very adult and were not handled in a way that I thought was overly friendly towards middle graders. There's not really any sort of way that you can connect to the main character. She's not very likable. There's not a whole lot of character development. Her character doesn't change throughout the book. You never see some of these things that people consider her bad flaws, her, stubbornness and that sort of thing. That never kind of comes back up as being actually a good trait. It was just a very strange book. I think I liked it a little bit more because I listened to it on audiobook. If I had been reading it, I don't know if I would have even gotten through the whole book. The next book that I read was Strange Magic by Sid Moore, and it is about a witch museum in Essex. And then there is a murder mystery that they have to solve, and they have to find the body of this witch. And it is I don't know how more perfect sounding a book could be for me. It is about witches, it's about a museum, it's about some sort of murdery mystery thing, and it's set in Britain. This book was awful. It was awful, and I was so sad because I had such high hopes that this was going to be such a good book. Even just a guilty pleasure kind of read, but it was just... For one thing that I thought was very strange was I did not realize that the person that you spent the first chapter with was not the main character. It took me, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of the book to realize that that first chapter was somebody completely different. So I kept getting really confused when this lady would talk about her job, because I was like, well, that's not what you were doing in the first chapter. The other thing that I really found bad was the romance. I love a good cheesy romance. You throw a romance into anything, I'm gonna be like, yes, I want those two to get together. But this was so almost unreadable. It read to me like his publisher told him these two characters should have a relationship. And so he would just drop sentences that didn't really make any sort of sense to who they were or why they would be attracted to each other. It made no sense. It was like, oh look, a girl and a guy, they must want to be together, right? The main character is a female, and she is so irritating. She would say things like, I wear makeup for me and not for men, but she would literally say that to you, to the reader. And I was like, you don't need to say that. Women think that, but we don't feel the need to tell ourselves, I'm wearing this for me and not for any sort of man. I only really finished the book because I was interested to see how it all ended, and not surprisingly, it ended kind of lamely. There's gonna be more books in the series. I have really no desire to read them, and I find that very surprising because it was supposed to be just such a Jessica book, and it just wasn't. Okay, on to better things. In the month of September, I managed to read 4 books after taking quite a long break from reading and deciding that I was just going to read some books that I owned instead of finding books at the library. And the first book that I read was Fell by Jen Ashworth. I picked this book up around Christmas time, January, and just never got around to it. It's got like a really pretty cover, very much like that. This is about a lady who's a little bit down on her luck, and she goes back to her parents' estate after everybody has passed away, and she decides she's going to fix up and then sell this house so she can have a little bit of money. But when she first gets to the house and she opens the door, she wakes up the ghosts of her parents who are kind of tied to this area. And then through a series of like flashbacks and modern day story, you get the picture of this summer where a man comes to stay with them. They actually rent out rooms in this house to boarders, and he is one of the boarders that come and stay. And he's got some kind of mysterious powers, we think. So I very much enjoyed this book. I really liked the modern day portions, probably the most. I was interested to see what happened with the boarder and the family, and kind of some mysterious things that happened with them. But kind of the thing that kept bringing me back to the book was figuring out what this lady was gonna do in like modern day and figuring out like where her life was going to go. There are a couple of characters that you meet. One is a tree trimmer and her partner, and their like family unit I could read like entire books about because they were so funny, and it's like such a real like family dynamic. And occasionally Jen Ashworth will write just like a couple little sentences that are going through the head of one of these ladies in the modern time. And I just like instantly got the feeling of exactly like what they were thinking about, how they felt about certain things. It is quite a short little book, but it packed quite the punch. So yeah, that is Fell by Jen Ashworth, and I would definitely read something by her in the future. So next I picked up a graphic novel from my library, and that is Thornhill by Pam Smythe. This is about a girl in like the 80s who lived in an orphanage that is across the street from a girl's house in modern day. And this girl in modern day is looking out at this orphanage and seeing some weird things, and so she tries to put together some of the pieces. And this is told in 2 parts. It's told in diary entries from the 80s, and then the other section is told just in pictures. So you've got pictures of like the modern day of what's going on, and then they're always separated by a black spread, which is probably why this book is so long and why it's so dark on the sides, because a lot of it is just like these black spreads. I expected this book to be considerably creepier. The story for me was a little bit kind of meh. One of the things in this book is you're not sure where her mom is. She's got pictures of her mom, but she doesn't live with her mom. And I got the impression that her mom has left, not that she has died. Through little snippets of like writings from her mom and that sort of thing, that it's not that her mom is dead, it's that her mom is just gone. I don't really understand why she does certain things that she does. The illustrations are cool. The illustrations are the coolest part about this. But I expected it to be a little creepier. I think they could have taken it farther and maybe done several people's stories within this. Third up in September, I read Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. Now this is shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize, which is the entire reason that I picked this up. I did not think that I would like it. This is like half historical fiction, half ghost story. Basically, it takes place all over one night as Abraham Lincoln goes and visits the grave of his son, Willie. And Willie has just died. This is told from many perspectives. One of my favorite things about it is that it reads, part of it almost reads like research, almost like research notes that somebody has done, because he's taken like a ton of different sources and then stuck little quotes from these sources into the story. And it's a really interesting thing. I haven't seen anybody do something quite as effectively as this. There's this one chapter is all about the moon and how the moon looked on the day of this party. and he has taken like 10 different people's accounts of what the moon looked like and put them one right after the other, and you can just see how different these different accounts are of what the moon really was like. In the other section, I've heard people say that it reminds them of a play, and when I initially flipped through it, that's what I thought too. I thought this looks very much like a play. But once you kind of get reading it, it's not like a play. It's like Saunders decided that he couldn't be bothered to write he said, they said, Bellman said, you know, over and over again, and instead just put like what they said and then their name, and then what somebody else said and then their name. And to me, it felt so natural and so easy that I'm surprised that I hadn't read somebody else do that before. The thing that really got me the most about this book is just how effortless it felt. He wasn't trying to be overly literary. I really enjoyed it, and the writing style obviously was a highlight for me. The story in of itself was still very good. Funnily enough, some of my favorite historical fiction deals with Lincoln. As you'll know, I read last year, again for the second time, I read Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and it was like it's such a fun book that if you haven't read it, you should. But again, this is another Lincoln book. I would not have read this if it wasn't for the Man Booker shortlisting it, and I'm really happy I did. And finally, the last book that I read is Idaho by Emily Ruskovich. And this, I just picked up a digital copy as well, and this takes place in Idaho on a mountain that is very isolated. And there's a family who lives on this mountain, and they go into the woods one day to get some firewood, and something happens in the woods, and it changes the family forever. You follow the story of somebody who has now come to live with part of the family and her attempt to figure out what happened and kind of live with the aftermath of it. One of the things that I was not expecting is this is also a really interesting commentary on what it's like when somebody starts to lose their mind. One of the main characters has early onset dementia, and he basically knew he was going to have this because everybody in his family basically dies when they're 50. I didn't expect that to be such a strong element, and it really added to like the mystery of the whole book. And not in a like gratuitous way, but in a, you really felt for this person because she was trying to understand and trying to get to the bottom of some things, and she just couldn't because there was this wall. She cannot find out anymore because he himself doesn't remember. I feel like this is her debut novel. If it is, it was an amazingly strong debut novel. That is going to finish up all of the books that I read in August and September. Please let me know down below what you guys have been reading. If you've read any of the books that I've read and you want to talk about them, let me know as well. And I will talk to you all very soon with another video. Bye.